Hi, thanks for checking out the On-Call Scheduler. I wanted to take a few minutes to walk you through the flow of what happens when you start using it and kind of the decisions you have to make as you set up a rotation and get the scheduling going. So let's do that. I'm starting here from oncallscheduler.com, where you can choose how you want to log in and authenticate. And I'm going to authenticate with christian@timewisp.com here, which is a user who has never accessed the On-Call Scheduler before. And so you get this screen asking you to give permission to Microsoft to authenticate this user with OncallScheduler.com. So the two things really that On-Call Scheduler gets here from Microsoft, the authenticating party, is one, Microsoft will say, yes, this is the user who owns this email address. We have verified that. And secondly, Oncall Scheduler will get the email address, which Oncall Scheduler uses to send email and meeting invites and such to you later. And you can see that Oncall Scheduler will also be able to see the name and a picture if there's a picture in your profile. It doesn't use this, but these are the minimum permissions that Oncall Scheduler has to ask for to get the email address. And you can, in most cases, you can consent on behalf of your organization, which means that once you have said it's okay for me to authenticate with oncallscheduler.com, then other people in your organization will not get the same prompt. And it works similarly with Google authentication. You get a slightly dialogue that looks a little bit different, but the principle is all the same. So I'm gonna accept that and continue. And here it tells me that no other person from my organization has previously used On-Call Scheduler, and so I get to create a whole new tenant. So I'll go ahead and do that. And now I have my own tenant, but it's pretty boring tenant. There are no on-call rotations, no shifts, nothing being scheduled and such. So the only thing I can do is see all the rotations, which is 0. And I can go here to set some tenant settings, because by virtue of me creating this tenant, I became the administrator of the tenant for my company in On-Call Scheduler. But you can add other tenant admins later if you want to. So anyway, let's proceed and set up a rotation. So first things first, what is a rotation in On-Call Scheduler? There are so many terms thrown about in various alerting systems, rotations and shifts and schedules and teams, and these things mean something slightly different in all these systems. In On-Call Scheduler, a rotation is a set of people who are together are responsible for staffing a set of shifts. So typically it would be everybody who works on the team that's responsible for supporting some set of services, or that will get the phone call when an incident occurs. But in a scenario such as follow the sun on-call scheduling, let's say you have one team in New York who works 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Some US time zone, and then you have a team in Bangalore who covers 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. So what their working hours are. Then you would have two separate rotations in On-Call Scheduler with those separate people. The people in New York would be one rotation. The people in Bangalore would be another rotation. And they would staff all their shifts separately, and you wouldn't merge them together into one follow the sun schedule until you sync these two rotations into your alerting system. The system that sends the text messages or makes the phone calls to let you know when there's an incident, like PagerDuty. So when you sync these two rotation schedules into PagerDuty, you would sync them into the same schedule in PagerDuty. So that's how rotations in On-Call Scheduler relate to schedules in PagerDuty, as an example. But let's go ahead here and give it a name, SAP infrastructure. Let's say that's what this team does. You select the time zone. If you're doing a follow the sun thing, you want all the rotations that will be syncing into the same schedule in an alerting service to be using the same time zone. It's important, otherwise you get challenges with springtime and wintertime and such. And we select the date. It's the date when the first shift will start that's being scheduled by this application. And I skipped here. You also select a shift pattern repeat. How often does the set of shifts that you're going to create later, how often do they repeat and become identical? Almost everybody uses weekly here as the repeat pattern, but there are people who use 2 weekly with shifts laid out, or every 5 days, or every 7 days, every 9 days and such. So you have that option, but weekly is by far the most common. And then you get to select how you do backup for your on-call. So some people don't have a backup at all. That would be the middle choice here. You're just assigned to a shift, and when you're assigned to that shift, you are the only person covering that shift. And if you don't pick up the phone and you don't acknowledge an incident, then the alert would go on to some other rotation, or some other person or some other system. But most on-call scheduling solutions, or that teams use, have the concept of there being a primary who gets the call first, and if they don't acknowledge the call or don't answer, then there is a backup person on call from the same team who will then get the call and be able to pick it up and acknowledge. And so you have two options here for how to schedule backup in relation to what the primary shifts you have. The first option here is that you're always backup the shift before you become primary. And the last option is the opposite, that you always backup the shift after you are primary. But I'll pick the first one there, which I think is the most common in the industry. And now we're moving on to defining how many shifts there are in each repeat period that we talked about earlier. We chose weekly as the repeat pattern, like the set of shifts with the same layout over time will repeat every week over and over again infinitely. And here you again have options depending on what your company, your team tends to do. The first option, and I think the most common, is that you don't have a follow the sun opportunity with different teams around the world covering shifts at different times. And you also do need to provide 24/7 on-call support. So that's the first option here. And then all you have to decide on is what's the handover time between shifts each day. And then you move on to decide how many days are each shift laid out over the week. So as an example, we can say one shift is Monday through Friday, and another one is Friday to Sunday, or Friday through Monday. You would start on Monday at 10 a.m. here, and you would go through Friday at 10 a.m. and then you would hand over to the second shift here, which goes from Friday 10 a.m. to Monday 10 a.m. again. That's one way you could do it. If you are setting up a rotation that won't cover 24 hours of each day, but only a subset, you would instead pick the second option here. Here, the shifts start a certain time each day and they end a certain time each day, but the shift can still cover multiple days. It's just it covers that part of the day each time. So as an example, let's do 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and let's say you're going to work that Monday through Friday. That's one shift. And I'm going to have another shift, still 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., but only on Saturday and Sunday. So here you work, there are the weekdays and there are the weekends. Just an example. Something to think about when you decide how long your shifts are within the repeat pattern is you want each shift to be roughly the same workload or equally desirable, undesirable. If you set this up so that one of the shifts is, let's say one of them is just Saturday. One is Monday through Friday and one of them is just Saturday. Maybe you'd be in a situation where everybody wants the Saturday shift because it's just one day. And nobody would want Monday through Friday. And you don't want a situation like that. Try to achieve a situation where the shifts, in the view of the team, have about equal desirability in general on a normal week. That's not special. So let's proceed with creating this rotation. Now we've gone through basic configuration, we've gone through scheduling, creating the schedule structure, and the rotation actually exists now. We can go in and see the shifts that were created. Here we have a Monday through Friday shift. Here we have a Saturday through Sunday. We can just make sure it looks okay, how the shifts were created. Oh, here's Halloween icon, Thanksgiving turkey icon. But we can just check that the shifts look like they're set up correctly. And then we can go back to the members tab and continue creating the rotation, because the next important step is to add the members, the people who will be part of this rotation. And I'm going to add 4 of them here. You can copy and paste from pretty much any email client, any format you have email addresses in. Try to paste it in here, it should work. You have to have at least 4 members for a rotation like this to make sense. There's no point trying to do this. This system will not work to schedule less than 4 people. And even 4 is really a stretch, right? It's super painful to have an on-call rotation of only 4 people, but it'll work. But ideally you would have more people. And adding them here to the list, make sure that your formatting is correct and everything. And when you're ready with that, you can keep adding more here and add them to the list. When you click this button, invitations will go out to those people, essentially telling them, hey, Christian at timewisp.com has set up a new rotation in the scheduling tool that we're going to use from now on. And so let's move on from that and go into the mailbox of one of these members who now received this invitation. So now I'm no longer Christian at timewisp.com. I'm, what was it, Kermit the Frog at timewisp.com. And this is the email that I received. Christian has set up a rotation, blah, 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 a little bit about the system. And I'll go back here to the view that Christian has on this, the person who set up the rotation. This is the view you get. Kind of takes a little bit of a pause here in setting up the rotation. You went through configuration, the schedule, you added the members, the email went out, but then there's no next here to start the scheduling, and that is on purpose. After you have set this up, you want to give the members some time to become familiar with the tool, to self-assign some shifts, to bid to avoid working on certain dates. And later on, you will want to go in when you feel like everybody has had a chance, maybe a week, to get this ready to prepare everything. You'll want to go in and start the automatic schedule. So it's a little bit of a pause here for the organizer. And now let's move back to Kermit and see what Kermit, who is a member of this rotation, what they can do. So there are a couple of links here in the email, and they're invited to view the rotation schedule. This is the schedule where they could just take a shift on for themselves. I'm still authenticated as Christian here because I'm in the same browser window, but it would be the same UI that Kermit would see. So that's one thing Kermit is invited to do. The other thing Kermit is invited to do is to go see the off-duty dates that he can enter for this rotation. So this is Kermit's preferences for when Kermit would not like to work. So those are the 2 things that Kermit is invited to do. But let's go back to being the organizer. The organizer is also a member. As you saw, I included Christian at timewisp.com here, together with Kermit the Frog at timewisp.com. Both part of the rotation will get scheduled. And so let's do this as Christian. I'm going to go in, I'm going to pick a couple of dates here first. So my wife's birthday is important to me, and it's someday in August, say. And I add that as a date when I would not like, I don't want to get scheduled for that date. Maybe Christmas is really important to me. Actually, it's super important. It's my family always has a huge thing. It's like the most important thing. So I'm gonna bid 2 credits to avoid Christmas. And let's say I'm a fan of American football, so I don't want Super Bowl either. So that's one thing I can do, enter my preferences, dates I don't want to get scheduled. And I can also go in and I can take some shifts that work for me. I'm just gonna choose a few at random here. And when I do, meeting invites go out when I get allocated these shifts. So they go out to the email address that I entered. Because Christian at TimeWisp is also the organizer, the administrator of this rotation, Christian can also assign shifts to other people here to start with. So I'll assign one to Jane. And the meeting invites will go out to Jane. And after a week or so, or however long, a couple of days, when everybody has had a chance to enter their preferences for days they don't want to work, and they've had a chance to choose shifts that work well for them, then you can press the Start Automatic Scheduling button. And that'll rattle off scheduling. It'll go through the shifts one by one. There we go. It's done. It'll go through the shifts one by one, and it will allocate them based on the algorithm that's used to allocate shifts. You can read more about that in the FAQ page. It'll avoid allocating shifts to people who have bid to avoid those dates. You can see as an example, this was my wife's birthday that I entered this one. I bid to avoid that one. So it would try to avoid allocating that to me, Christian. And it allocates the shifts up to a certain date in the future, which by default is 6 months into the future. Users can still go in and take shifts after that time horizon. So that's the basics of how the app works. There are a couple of additional things that an administrator can do. They can enter block periods. If somebody is on leave, say parental leave, for a couple of months, or 6 months or whatever it is that you do in your company, that you can create a block period and they get excluded from scheduling for that period. And any shifts that are assigned to them will get freed up and allocated through the auctioning process that's used to find takers for more urgent shifts that open up. You can add and remove credits to people, stuff like that. A bunch of little features here, but the one I do want to mention, the next most important step for you to take as an administrator in setting this up is you go into the rotation administration here, and you can configure synchronization with an alerting system. Now, there are two types of alerting systems supported today. One is PagerDuty, and it's baked in. It's already there from the start. You click to configure it here, and you can set everything up to sync into PagerDuty, and also to merge with another rotation if you want to do a follow the sun thing. The other type of alerting system that you can sync with would be a custom one. Then, so that would be one, if you have an alerting system that's your own custom implementation internally in your company, then there's a REST API endpoint that you can write a pretty simple app to suck down the schedule from the Oncall Scheduler to be able to write it into your custom alerting system. And if you register one of those, they would also show up here on the rotation configuration page. So I think that's it. Those are all the main points of how the system works, and I hope you'll find it interesting enough, valuable enough to go through the steps of setting it up, and that you'll find that it creates a schedule that is really fair, predictable, gives all the members of rotation control, and once you have it set up, you'll probably forget about it. It'll be every few months, maybe you'll have some way you have to interact with the system, but very little and much less than how much time you spend on on-call scheduling today. So thanks a lot.